Hi. This might turn out to be a lengthy video for several reasons, not the least of which is I've got a lot of places marked in the Bible to give uh, uh, some instances that will go along with what I'm going to do today. The most thing I'm going to do today is giving you some words that are used fairly often and that a lot of people don't understand them. And if you don't understand something, you're not going to get anything out of it. So I'm going to tell you the meanings of these words and give you examples of them. The first one is martyr. Now, I looked up these uh, meanings on the dictionary online. A martyr is a person who is put to death on behalf of any belief, principle, or cause. Now, the example I'm going to use on this is I know this isn't the whole story, but this will make the point. This is in Acts chapter 22. And anyway, Paul was uh, in the temple and he was praying and he said, I was in a trance. This was in verse 17. And saw him, saying unto me, Make haste, and get thee quickly out of Jerusalem, for they will not receive thy testimony concerning me. And I said, Lord, they know that I am imprisoned and beat in every synagogue them that believed on thee. And when the blood of thy martyr Stephen was shed, I also was standing by, and consenting unto his death, and kept the raiment of them that slew him. So Stephen was martyred for the cause of Christ. And Paul was just admitting that he was there, he was all for it, and he held their coats, in today's terminology, while they stoned him to death. Now, the second one is rapture. There's a lot of people that say, well, rapture's not in the Bible, so I'm not going to believe in it, blah, 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 blah. Well, I've got some news for you. There's no giraffe in the Bible. There's no hippopotamus in the Bible. There's no rhinoceros in the Bible. So when you see pictures of them, just disregard them because they don't exist, right? Right? Well, okay. This is the definition of rapture in there. The carrying of a person to another place or sphere of existence. It just means you're moved from this world into a new world. Now then, uh, the the thing for the rapture, a lot of people know about the Second Thessalonians, but this is in First Corinthians. Like I said, I've got to find these passages. I've got them marked, but not really, really well, apparently. Because I should already been there. Anyway, uh, the the one I'm going to be reading from is in 1 Corinthians 15:52. And I marked that on the wrong page. Like I said, it's going to take a little while. But I wanted everybody to get examples and understand these words. And this is starting in verse 51 in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Behold, I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, for the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. For this corruptible must put on incorruption, and this mortal must put on immortality. In other words, these earthly bodies that are going to die, we're going to be changed and we won't die again. Okay, the next one is omniscient. It is having complete or unlimited knowledge, awareness, or understanding. And that one we're going to go to Matthew chapter 6. I would love to be able to do some kind of filler here while I'm turning pages. I'm not capable of multitasking like some people are. You know, like my youngest son, he can type with one hand and eat a sandwich with the other and drink a soda all at the same time. Unfortunately, those genes didn't come from me. Okay, here we are in chapter 6, and it's in verse 8 area where I'm going to be reading. When it's basically talking about praying, it's starting at verse 5. And when thou prayest, thou shalt not be as the hypocrites are, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and in the corners of the streets, that they may be seen of men. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. But thou, when thou prayest, enter into thy closet, and when thou hast shut thy door, pray to thy Father which is in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret shall reward thee openly. But when you pray, use not vain repetitions as the heathen do, for they think that they shall be heard for their much speaking. Be not you therefore like unto them, for your Father knoweth what things you have need of before you ask him. Pretty sure that's meeting this definition, having complete awareness. Now, omnipresent. It's defined as present everywhere at the same time. Now, the example I'm going to use for it is in Matthew 28:20. Now, some of these I could probably quote, but I don't like taking chances, because if I miss a word or whatever, that's going to mess things up. And we're warned against leaving something out or adding something to it, aren't we? Okay, so here in Matthew 28:20, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you, and lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. Amen. So, yeah, he's everywhere. All right, now then, omnipotent, almighty, or infinite in power. Finite means you're limited. Infinite means there's no limit. God has no limit. He can do whatever he wants to. And I've got several examples here showing that. One is in Matthew chapter 17. And I think I might have that one marked well. Yes. Wow. I'm impressed with myself. Okay, this is starting in verse 24. And when they were come to Capernaum, they that received tribute money came to Peter and said, Doth not your master pay tribute? He said, Yes. And when he was come into the house, Jesus prevented him, saying, What thinkest thou, Simon? Of whom do the kings of the earth take custom or tribute? of their own children, or of strangers? Peter saith unto them, Of strangers. Jesus saith unto him, Then are the children free. Notwithstanding, lest we should offend them, go thou to the sea, and cast a hook, and take up the fish that first cometh up, and when thou hast opened his mouth, thou shalt find a piece of money. That take and give unto them for me and thee. Now, I couldn't tell somebody go catch a fish, and the first one you catch is going to have money in its mouth. You know why? Because I'm not God. I'm not omnipotent. It means all powerful. Now, there's another couple of examples here. One is in 1 Kings. We're going to have to go all the way back to the Old Testament. And this is talking about Israel was in a fight, and Ahab was the king of Israel at the time. And he wasn't a swell guy, I'll put it that way. Okay, so in chapter 22, 1 Kings, starting in verse 30, And the king of Israel said unto Jehoshaphat, I will disguise myself and enter into the battle, but put thou on thy robes. And the king of Israel disguised himself and went into the battle. But the king of Syria commanded his 32 captains that had rule over his chariots, saying, Fight neither with small nor great, save only with the king of Israel. In other words, go after him, forget the rest of them. And it came to pass, when the captains of the chariots saw Jehoshaphat, that they said, Surely it is the king of Israel. And they turned aside to fight against him. And Jehoshaphat cried out. And it came to pass, when the captains of the chariots perceived that it was not the king of Israel, that they turned back from pursuing him. And a certain man drew a bow at a venture, and smote the king of Israel, that's Ahab, between the joints of the harness. Wherefore he said unto the driver of his chariot, Turn thine hand and carry me out of the host, for I am wounded. It goes on to say he died that evening. So he did what he thought would keep him safe, but it was his turn to go. We all have an appointment, and his was then. And this guy just had a whim, just boom, and he hit the king and killed him. He wanted to put Jehoshaphat in harm's way and keep him safe. Didn't work. God's in charge, not a man. Now here's another example of that. This is 1 Samuel chapter 17. Obviously also in the Old Testament. And this is going to be a little bit of reading. So I'm going to start in verse 42. And when the Philistine looked about, that'll be one of the most famous non-Jewish characters in the Old Testament, Goliath. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth, and ruddy, and of a fair countenance. And the Philistine said unto David, Am I a dog that thou comest to me with staves? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, Come to me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air, and to the beasts of the field. Then said David to the Philistine, Thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand, and I will smite thee, and take thine head from thee, and I will give the carcasses of the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air, and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And all this assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. And it came to pass, when the Philistine arose, and came and drew nigh to meet David, that David hasted and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand in his bag, and took thence a stone, and slang it, and smote the Philistine in his forehead, that the stone sunk into his forehead, and he fell upon his face to the earth. So David prevailed over the Philistine with the sling and with the stone, and smote the Philistine and slew him, but there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran and stood upon the Philistine, and took his sword, and drew it out of the sheath thereof, and slew him, and cut off his head therewith. And when the Philistines saw their champion was dead, they fled. They weren't scared of this little boy. They were scared of the God that sent him and gave him the power to do this. Now, I'm going to tell you a personal story about how I came to understand that God is omnipotent or all-powerful. A friend of mine that passed recently, John Mitchell, he and his wife came to the panhandle of Texas, where we both used to work, and he was doing a revival at a church near town there, and we went over there, and early that morning, God brought this to my mind, because I had no reason to, but I counted my money. We'd gotten our income tax return, and so, I still had some of it left, and I counted my money, and I had $600 in my wallet. And when we got out to the church, the Lord led me to give Brother John Mitchell $100. And I testified about this the next night, by the way. And I gave him that $100, and I went home, and I felt like I needed to count my money again. $600. I can't pull $100 out of thin air, but God can. Just like he put that coin in that fish's mouth. He put $100 in my wallet. Point about that is, when God tells you to do something, just do it. God told David to go kill that Philistine, Goliath, cut his head off, and he took it back to Jerusalem, by the way. Where Jesus was crucified, they call that the place of the skull, because that's where they buried Goliath's head, on that hill. But I hope this helps y'all understand some of these terms and everything, and because knowledge is one thing, but understanding is another. I heard a good example of that here recently. This just came to me. Knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit, but wisdom is knowing it don't go in a fruit salad. I love y'all. We'll see you next time. Bye.